we need to talk about Chelsea because they have a huge, and I mean huge, problem on their hands. But wait, you might be thinking, why is this idiot talking about Chelsea having a huge problem, and I mean huge, when they just put 4 past Manchester City, the same team that are treble winners, the best team in the league, possibly the best team in the world, and a game before that, they took it to Tottenham, put 4 past them, and at the time, Tottenham were top of the league, undefeated, and were looking absolutely incredible. And a couple games before that, they took it to Arsenal, who, depending on who you ask, might be the second best team in the league. They took it to them and probably should have won that game as well. So considering all of what I just said, why do I think they have a huge problem on their hands? Well, actually, Chelsea's problems lie in those very games. It may seem that Chelsea are on an upwards trajectory. They took it to Arsenal, they took it to Tottenham, they took it to Manchester City. It looks like they're taking it in their stride. They're moving forward. They're looking better and better with every single game. But I think that's the problem. They're only playing well against the big teams, because we saw it against Arsenal, and then the very next game against Brentford, they lost. And I think the problem with Chelsea is they can only really take it to big teams the way they're currently constructed. With the amount of young players at their disposal and the amount of young talent that they have in their starting 11 and whatever team they really put out, they thrive in those situations against the big teams. Because guess what? In those situations, Chelsea don't need to be the problem solvers. They can actually just sit back and read and react. And it's the perfect situation for young players. It may seem counterintuitive. I know it's crazy. You're talking about young players playing better against big teams versus the smaller teams. But that's it. It's problem solving, right? When you're going up against a Brentford or you're going up against a Sheffield United as Chelsea, you have to be the problem solvers. You have to take the game by the scruff of the neck and figure out what to do. You're playing against low blocks, and you have to break them down. You have to be extremely well versed and cohesive, have patterns of play, and be very, very experienced. Key experience to take down teams like that. And obviously, you have to be experienced to take down an Arsenal, Tottenham, or Manchester City as well. But guess what? Against those teams, you can use your young legs and that amount of energy to put the pressure on them. And when those sorts of teams, those higher upper echelon teams turn the ball over, guess what? You have space. You have boundless amounts of space versus a team like a West Ham or a Sheffield, or teams like that just play a low block and sit, because those sorts of teams know that they're at a disadvantage versus Chelsea. Whereas against Manchester City or an Arsenal or a Tottenham, those teams know they're the A side and they have to be the problem solvers against a Chelsea. And so when they find themselves in all that space, they have all this young talent and runners and extreme pace with, a Raheem Sterling and Nicholas Jackson. They have the space for all these young guns to go and thrive. And I think it's a perfect situation for all those young players, because they have a team full of them. They have a squad full of those young players. And they're just able to be free flowing and thrive in those sorts of situations up against the big teams. But that same reason is their problem and why they struggle against teams that are sitting back and defending for their lives against Chelsea, because they know they don't have the talent versus Chelsea and they have to try and win the game in a different way. And that's exactly why I think they struggle, because they don't have these patterns of plays built up, and they, can't go and problem solve. These young players don't have the experience of that. And so I think that's why they struggle against the lower end teams that play a low block or play extremely defensively, play compact, and try and cut out all the space. You have to be extremely well versed, and you look at a team like Manchester City, who are one of the best at breaking down low blocks and, of that sort of manner. When, you're a team that has most of the possession and the other team, all they're doing is just defending and hoping for a counterattack. You see that Manchester City have so many set plays almost. They put it out to the wing. You have runners moving back and forth. It's so intricate. It's such a well-versed system. But you look at Chelsea in that same sort of situation, they're almost running around like headless chickens. They don't know what to do. They know they have the better players. They know they have the ball. They know that they should be winning this game, but they can't seize that opportunity and they can't take a hold of it. And that's why I think they struggle in those games, and we see them fall behind or, concede stupid goals, because they can't really take that game on against those teams. But then put them up against the Manchester City, where, as I said, they have space and they have the talent to break through even the press of a Manchester City. And once they get out of that and they have that space in the other half, you could see them. They were absolutely thriving. Raheem Sterling looked as great as ever. And, he isn't one of those young talents, but he is still pretty young. I think people forget that Raheem Sterling is only 28, but, obviously he's very, very experienced. He's not the one I'm talking about, but Raheem Sterling looked great. Reece James, obviously, we know how incredible of a player he is, but players like Nicholas Jackson, Cole Palmer especially, he is an incredible talent. And you can see when he has the creative freedom and he has that space to be able to make passes and plays for this Chelsea side and the players around him, you can see he looks a lot better, right? And basically that whole team from front to back just looks like a much better unit when they're the team, when they're the B-side, basically, when they are not the team that really should be having the advantage. Because we saw countless times they were really putting the pressure on Manchester City, that midfield, and those young legs were doing their job. They were pressuring Manchester City, and they were able to win back possession higher up the pitch. And, some of that you could attribute to Manchester City not being their best on the day. Some of those players, some of the Manchester City players weren't at their best. Ruben Diaz wasn't at his best. To be fair, there were countless mistakes on the Manchester City side that you don't really come to expect of them. But still, I think you could attribute some of that to Chelsea and their ability to put the pressure on Manchester City, win the ball back. And more incredibly, they were playing out of Manchester City's press. And they were finding that space a countless number of times. And you do really have to give them props because they just look so good, and you can see that talent and that ability when they play against those big teams. And you look at this Chelsea team and you're really saying, wow, I did not expect this at all, considering some of the previous games or how they've been in the past, 12 to 18 months. And you really do start to scratch your head and wonder, how are they beating Manchester City? The same team that was struggling game after game after game. Luton Town was their only win for, a month or something. They couldn't score goals. They couldn't do absolutely anything. But here they are, putting 4 past Tottenham, putting 4 past Manchester City. And it's a wonderful turnaround, but I fear the worst for Chelsea. Because although they look great now, and look, I'll be honest, I could be completely wrong. There's a reason this channel is called A Casual Take. I could be absolutely stupid. I could look like an idiot. Chelsea could go on to win their next 5 or 6 games. And maybe this is the trend. Maybe Chelsea can play good football, game in and game out. All right? But I don't think so. I don't think that is the case. I think we'll go see them play against the West Ham in a couple of weeks or something, and they will struggle against that low block, and they won't be able to break it down, and we will be looking at Chelsea again. They lose 2 or 3 games in a row, or they don't win games that they should be winning, and we'll be looking at Chelsea in the same way again. Like, how do they have this much talent? How have they spent this much money? They have all these, they have boundless amounts of talent, but yet they still can't beat a West Ham or a Sheffield United, etc., etc. But then at the same time, I think they could come up against a Liverpool and do the same thing. They could absolutely bop them off the park. Nicholas Jackson can finally start scoring goals, and they'll look good again. But look, it's baffling, to be honest. It's extremely baffling, but I think that's the trade-off or the double-edged sword that you have with having young players and young talent, right? You have the one side where you have the energy and the just the creativity. They're not shackled, and they don't have the fear. It's fearlessness, really, and so they can take it to those bigger teams. But then you put them up against a team that they should be beating, and their mindset starts to break down. Maybe it's human nature of those younger players, but even still, you have players like Thiago Silva around them, Raheem Sterling around them, that should be coaching them through that. And you have Mauricio Pochettino, who's great with young players, who should be coaching them through that. But yet still we find Chelsea struggling in those positions. And look, I'm not going to sit up here on my high horse and act like I know what they have to do to fix that. Look, the only thing I could say is, maybe there's some growing pains and they'll learn. And with experience, in a year or two from now, we'll see this team be a title contender. And, with those games against the bigger teams, plus beating the teams that they should be beating, we'll see them finally flourish and be back to where Chelsea should be. But I don't think that's the simple answer. I think there's something you could do right now in the present to be able to fix that. And I'm not qualified to say that. If I was, I wouldn't be here. I definitely wouldn't be here. I'll tell you that much. I would not be here. Oh, but that's besides the point. So look, I've probably gone on for too long now, but basically the premise of what I'm saying with this whole Chelsea problem is good against bad team, bad against bad team. Wait, no. Good against good, bad and this is beating my ass. Good against good, bad against bad. You understand, all right? If you've watched this long, I think you understand my point. Hopefully you do.